The auctioneer's gavel struck the wooden podium with a crack that echoed through the dusty auction house like a gunshot. And Martha Garrett felt her entire world shatter into pieces as cruel laughter rippled through the crowd of farmers and ranchers who had gathered in Sierra Vista, Arizona territory, that blazing June afternoon in 1882. "Barren as the desert in August," the auctioneer bellowed, his voice dripping with mockery as he gestured toward Martha standing on the platform beside her deceased father's remaining possessions. "Any man foolish enough to take on Samuel Garrett's debts will be getting damaged goods with this one. 28 years old and never carried a child to term, not that she ever will by the looks of her." Martha's cheeks burned with humiliation as dozens of eyes fixed upon her, some pitying, most simply curious to witness her degradation. Her father had died 3 weeks prior, leaving behind a mountain of gambling debts and a ranch so mortgaged that even the horses had been claimed by creditors. Everything she had known, everything she had loved, was being sold piece by piece to satisfy the vultures who had circled her father during his final desperate years. The auction house smelled of sweat, tobacco, and the acrid sting of shame. Martha stood rigid in her best dress, a faded blue calico that had seen better days, her auburn hair pinned back severely from a face that would have been beautiful if not for the hollow despair in her green eyes. She had known this day was coming, had prepared herself for the loss of her home, but she had not anticipated this final cruelty, this public announcement of her deepest wound. She had been married once, briefly, to a rancher named Thomas who had promised her the world and delivered only disappointment and pain. 3 pregnancies in 2 years, each one ending in heartbreak before the 3rd month arrived. Thomas had grown cold, then angry, then violent, and finally he had simply ridden away one morning and never returned. The divorce papers had arrived 6 months later from California, and Martha had returned to her father's failing ranch, broken in body and spirit. Perhaps she would make a decent housekeeper, someone called from the crowd, sparking another round of laughter. Martha lifted her chin, refusing to let them see her cry. She had survived worse than this. She would survive this too. That was when she saw him. A cowboy stood at the back of the auction house, leaning against the rough wooden wall with his arms crossed over his chest. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes that seemed to burn with quiet intensity, even from across the room. Unlike the others who laughed and jeered, his expression was serious, almost angry. He wore dusty work clothes, a faded blue shirt and leather vest, and a gun belt that suggested he knew how to use the weapon it carried. Their eyes met for just a moment, and something passed between them, something Martha could not name but felt deep in her chest like a physical blow. The auctioneer continued his cruel commentary, detailing every debt her father had left, every piece of property that would be sold, and making it abundantly clear that Martha herself had no prospects, no future, no hope. The ranch would go to the bank. The cattle had already been sold. The furniture would be auctioned next week. Martha would be left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the shame of her father's failures. "Now, gentlemen," the auctioneer said, his voice taking on a mockingly theatrical tone, "if any among you are feeling particularly charitable, Miss Garrett here does need employment. She can cook, clean, and mend, though as I have mentioned, she cannot provide the one thing most men want from a wife." Martha felt something inside her break at those words. Her hands trembled, and she clasped them together to hide the shaking. She wanted to run, to flee from this place and never return, but pride kept her rooted to the spot. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her flee. The cowboy at the back of the room suddenly straightened. He moved through the crowd with a purposeful stride that made people step aside instinctively. He was younger than Martha had initially thought, perhaps 30 or 31, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent under the relentless Arizona sun. There was a quiet strength in the way he moved, a confidence that commanded attention without demanding it. He stopped directly in front of the auctioneer's podium and looked up at Martha with those intense eyes. Up close, she could see they were a striking shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "How much?" he asked, his voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. The auctioneer blinked, clearly surprised by this development. "I beg your pardon, how much does she owe?" The cowboy did not look away from Martha as he spoke. "What is the total of her father's debts?" A murmur ran through the crowd. The auctioneer shuffled his papers, his showmanship faltering in the face of this unexpected question. "Well, now, let me see. The total comes to approximately $1,200, including interest and fees." It was an astronomical sum, more money than most cowboys earned in 2 years of hard work. Martha felt her breath catch. She wanted to tell this stranger not to be foolish, that she was not worth such a sacrifice, but her voice seemed to have abandoned her entirely. The cowboy reached into his vest and pulled out a leather wallet. "I have $800 in cash right now. I can have the rest within 3 months with interest." The auction house fell silent. Even the auctioneer seemed at a loss for words. "You cannot be serious," someone finally said from the crowd. The cowboy turned slowly, his hand resting casually on his gun belt in a gesture that was not quite threatening but carried clear warning nonetheless. "I am entirely serious. I will pay Miss Garrett's debts in full. In return, I expect all claims against her and her father's property to be released immediately upon final payment." The auctioneer looked from the cowboy to Martha and back again, clearly calculating whether this was a legitimate offer or some kind of elaborate joke. Finally, he nodded slowly. The bank would need to agree to such terms, but with $800 in hand and a promissory note for the balance, I believe we can come to an arrangement. "May I have your name, sir?" "Kyle Ramsey," the cowboy said. "I run cattle on the northern range, up near the Huachuca Mountains. Any banker in town can vouch for my credit." Martha found her voice at last. "Wait," she said, and both men looked up at her. "Mr. Ramsey, you do not know me. You do not owe me anything. Why would you do this?" Kyle Ramsey's expression softened slightly, and something that might have been a smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Because, Miss Garrett, what that auctioneer said about you is not a mark of shame. It is not your fault, and it does not define your worth. And if it is true, well then, you will have plenty of time to love only me without the distraction of children. That seems like a fair bargain to me." The auction house erupted in shocked conversation. Martha felt tears spring to her eyes, but for the first time in months, they were not tears of despair. Someone had defended her. Someone had seen her humiliation and responded with kindness instead of mockery. It was so unexpected, so completely outside her experience of the past few years, that she did not know how to respond. The auctioneer banged his gavel repeatedly to restore order. "Well, this is most irregular, but if Mr. Ramsey is serious about his offer, I suppose we must consider it. The bank representative is here today. Let us discuss the terms." The next hour passed in a blur of legal language and signatures. Martha stood to the side, feeling disconnected from her own body as lawyers and bankers argued over the specifics of the arrangement. Kyle Ramsey remained calm throughout, answering questions with quiet confidence and producing documents that proved he was indeed a man of means, despite his dusty appearance. Finally, it was done. The auctioneer announced that all debts against Samuel Garrett's estate had been assumed by Kyle Ramsey, and that the auction would not proceed as planned. The crowd dispersed slowly, people casting curious and speculative glances at Martha and her unexpected benefactor. When the auction house had mostly cleared, Kyle approached Martha again. She noticed he moved with a slight limp, favoring his left leg, an old injury perhaps from a horse or a fight. "Miss Garrett," he said quietly, "I hope I did not overstep. You are under no obligation to me beyond what the law requires. I do not expect anything from you that you are not willing to give." Martha studied his face, searching for signs of deception or ulterior motive. She had learned to be wary of men who made grand gestures. But all she saw in Kyle Ramsey's eyes was a quiet sincerity that made her chest tighten with emotion. "Why?" she asked again. "You spent your fortune on a stranger. For what purpose?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting toward the now empty podium where she had stood in humiliation. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried the weight of deep conviction. "3 years ago, I lost my wife and infant daughter to fever," he said. "Sarah was the kindest woman I ever knew, and she deserved a better husband than me. I was always working, always gone, trying to build something I thought would make her proud. I was not there when she needed me most. When they died, I realized that all my ambition, all my plans for the future, meant nothing without someone to share it with." He turned back to Martha, and she saw genuine pain in his eyes. "I have spent 3 years alone, telling myself I was content with solitude. But watching that auctioneer mock you, seeing the cruelty in that room, I realized I was lying to myself. I do not want to be alone anymore. And you, Miss Garrett, deserve better than to be treated as some kind of defective merchandise." Martha felt her throat constrict with emotion. "You do not know me," she whispered. "I may not be what you think. I may not be capable of loving anyone anymore." "Then we will find out together," Kyle said simply. "I am not asking you to marry me today or even to make any promises. I am simply offering you a chance to start over, away from this place and these people who have judged you so harshly. My ranch has a main house where you could stay with complete privacy. I have a small cabin where I can live. You can work for me as a housekeeper if you wish to maintain propriety, or you can simply rest and heal from whatever wounds you carry. There is no pressure, no expectation." It was the most extraordinary offer Martha had ever received. Part of her wanted to refuse on principle, to prove she could survive on her own without any man's charity. But another part of her, a part that had been beaten down and nearly destroyed by years of disappointment, whispered that perhaps this was her chance to escape, to rebuild, to discover if there was anything left of the woman she had once been. "I will come to your ranch," she said finally, "as your housekeeper with wages and proper accommodation. I will not be any man's charity case, Mr. Ramsey, but I will accept honest employment." Kyle nodded, and this time his smile reached his eyes. "That seems fair. I warn you, though, I am a terrible cook, and the house is in desperate need of a woman's touch. You may end up earning every penny of your wages." Despite everything, Martha felt a small smile tug at her own lips. It felt strange, like using muscles she had forgotten she possessed. They left Sierra Vista the following morning, after Martha had packed her few remaining possessions into a canvas bag and said goodbye to the small room above the general store, where she had been staying since her father's death. The ranch was a half-day's ride north, up into the foothills of the Huachuca Mountains, where the air was slightly cooler and the grassland gave way to scattered juniper and oak. Kyle rode a sturdy buckskin gelding and led a gentle mare for Martha. As they traveled, he pointed out landmarks and told her about the country they passed through. He spoke about the ranch he had built from nothing over the past 8 years, about the challenges of running cattle in Arizona Territory, about the Apache troubles that had plagued the region until Geronimo's recent capture. Martha listened more than she spoke, content to let Kyle's voice wash over her as they rode. She studied him when he was not looking, noting the way he sat his horse with easy grace despite his injured leg, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon out of long habit, the gentleness with which he treated his animals. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit. As they sat in the shade of a spreading cottonwood tree, Kyle asked Martha about her life before the auction. She found herself telling him things she had not spoken of in years. About her mother, who had died when Martha was 12, leaving her to care for her father and younger brother. About her brother Daniel, who had gone east to study medicine and now lived in Boston with a wife and 2 children, too far away to help when their father's fortunes had collapsed. About her brief, painful marriage and the losses she had suffered, Kyle listened without judgment, his expression sympathetic but not pitying. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "You have survived more than most people face in a lifetime. That takes strength, Miss Garrett. Do not ever let anyone make you feel weak." They reached the ranch in the late afternoon. It was more substantial than Martha had expected, with a sturdy 2-story house built of adobe and timber, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals containing perhaps 50 head of cattle and a dozen horses. The property was nestled in a valley with a year-round stream running through it and mountains rising on 3 sides to provide shelter from the worst of the weather. "It is beautiful," Martha said, and meant it. Kyle helped her dismount, his hand steady at her waist. For just a moment, they stood close together, and Martha caught the scent of leather and sage and something uniquely him. Her heart beat faster and she stepped back quickly, confused by her own reaction. If Kyle noticed her discomfort, he did not show it. He led her into the house, which was indeed in need of attention. The front room was comfortable enough, with a large stone fireplace and sturdy furniture, but dust covered every surface and dishes were piled in the kitchen basin. Papers and books were scattered everywhere, and the whole place had the slightly neglected air of a home occupied by someone who spent more time working than living. "I apologize for the state of things," Kyle said, looking embarrassed. "I have been managing on my own for quite a while, and housekeeping has never been my strength." "It is nothing that cannot be fixed with some effort," Martha assured him. "Show me where I will be staying." He led her upstairs to a spacious bedroom with large windows overlooking the valley. The room was clean but sparsely furnished, with a bed, dresser, and washstand. Someone had made an effort here, Martha noticed. Fresh linens were on the bed, and wildflowers had been placed in a vase on the dresser. "This was going to be a guest room," Kyle explained. "I hoped one day Daniel might come visit, bring his family, but it has never happened. It is yours now for as long as you want it." "Daniel?" Martha asked, confused. "My brother," Kyle clarified. "He lives in Colorado, works as a schoolteacher. We write occasionally, but it has been years since we have seen each other." Martha felt a strange kinship with this man who also had a brother named Daniel, far away and living a different life. It seemed like another small thread connecting them. Kyle showed her the rest of the house, then excused himself to tend to the animals. Martha unpacked her few belongings and then set about exploring her new domain. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, with a good stove and ample storage. The pantry held basic supplies but was poorly organized. The rest of the house showed signs of comfortable living, periodically interrupted by long absences. She found herself drawn to little details that revealed Kyle's character. A stack of books by the fireplace, ranging from practical guides on animal husbandry to poetry by Longfellow. a carefully mended shirt hanging in the bedroom he had pointed out as his own, a photograph on the mantel showing a young woman holding a baby, their faces serious in the way of formal portraits. Sarah and her daughter, Martha realized. She studied the image, feeling a strange pang of sympathy for this other woman who had lived in this house and loved the same man. Over the following weeks, Martha threw herself into making the house a home. She cleaned and organized, cooked proper meals, and gradually transformed the neglected space into something warm and welcoming. Kyle was absent during most days, working with his small crew of ranch hands to move cattle, mend fences, and prepare for the brutal summer heat that was approaching. But in the evenings, he would return to the house, clean up at the pump outside, and join Martha for dinner. These meals became the foundation of something neither of them had anticipated: friendship. They talked about everything and nothing. Kyle told her about his childhood in Texas, about following the cattle trails north as a young man, about the dream that had drawn him to Arizona territory. Martha shared memories of better times with her father, before the gambling had consumed him, and stories about her mother's gentle wisdom. Slowly, carefully, they began to trust each other. One evening, about a month after Martha's arrival, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The air was warm but pleasant, and the sound of crickets filled the valley. "I need to tell you something," Kyle said suddenly, his voice serious. Martha felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. "What is it?" "I am going to be making payments to the bank every month to cover your father's debts," he said. "It is my responsibility, and I do not want you to worry about it. But I want you to know exactly what is owed and how the payments are being made. I believe in honesty between people who are living under the same roof." He pulled out a ledger and showed her the numbers: the total debt, the amount he had already paid, the schedule of future payments. Everything was carefully documented and completely transparent. "You did not have to show me this," Martha said quietly. "Yes, I did," Kyle replied. "You are not my property, Martha. You are not beholden to me beyond the wages we agreed upon. I want you to understand that you have complete freedom here. If you decide to leave, you can leave. I will still honor the debt. My offer that day in Sierra Vista was not conditional on you staying with me forever." Martha felt tears sting her eyes. "Why are you so kind to me?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening mountains. "Because kindness costs nothing," he finally said. "And because I have learned that life is too short to waste on anything less than genuine connection. I like having you here, Martha. I like coming home to a clean house and a warm meal. I like talking to you in the evenings. I like knowing I am not alone anymore, but I do not want you to feel trapped. Your presence here should be your choice, not your obligation." Martha reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the arm of his chair. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched him, and she felt him tense slightly in surprise. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for defending me that day, for bringing me here, for treating me with respect and dignity. You have given me something I thought I had lost forever." "What is that?" Kyle asked, turning to look at her. "Hope," Martha said simply. Their eyes met in the fading light, and Martha felt something shift inside her chest, like a locked door beginning to open. She was not ready to step through that door yet, but for the first time in years, she believed she might be ready someday. As summer deepened into the intense heat of July and August, the friendship between Martha and Kyle continued to grow. They fell into comfortable rhythms, learning each other's habits and preferences. Martha discovered that Kyle was an early riser who liked his coffee strong and black. Kyle learned that Martha preferred to bake bread in the coolest part of the morning, and that she hummed softly to herself when she thought no one was listening. There were challenges, of course. Martha still woke sometimes from nightmares about her failed marriage and lost pregnancies. On those nights, she would sit by her window and watch the stars, trying to calm her racing heart. Kyle respected her privacy, never pushing for more than she was willing to give, but she sometimes caught him watching her with concern in his eyes. Kyle had his own demons. His injured leg troubled him on cold mornings or after long days of hard work. He would try to hide his discomfort, but Martha learned to read the subtle signs. The tightness around his eyes, the way he would shift his weight, the careful way he lowered himself into a chair. "Tell me about your injury," she said one evening as she helped him remove his boots, a routine that had developed naturally after she noticed him struggling. Kyle hesitated, then sighed. "It was a riding accident about 5 years ago. A stallion threw me and my leg got caught in the stirrup. I was dragged for nearly a quarter mile before I could get free. The bone healed badly and there was nerve damage. Some days are worse than others." "Does it hurt now?" Martha asked, her hands gentle as she helped him prop his leg on a footstool. "Some," he admitted, "but less than it used to. Having you here helps, actually. Knowing there is someone who cares enough to notice makes it somehow easier to bear." Martha felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. She was coming to care for this quiet, strong man who had rescued her when no one else would. She was coming to depend on his steady presence, his gentle humor, his unwavering integrity. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. In late August, a crisis brought everything into sharp focus. A brush fire started on the eastern boundary of the ranch, driven by fierce winds that had been building all day. Kyle and his men rushed to fight it, working frantically to protect the cattle and buildings. Martha watched from the house, her heart in her throat as flames painted the night sky orange and red. Kyle did not return to the house that night, or the following day. Martha kept coffee brewing and food ready, knowing the men would need sustenance when they finally got the fire under control. By the second evening, she was nearly frantic with worry. She had heard no news, seen no sign of anyone, and the smoke that darkened the sky suggested the fire was still burning. Finally, as the sun was setting on the third day, Martha saw riders approaching. She ran out to meet them, scanning the group desperately for Kyle's familiar figure. He was there, smoke blackened and exhausted, slumped forward in his saddle. "Kyle," she called out, and he straightened at the sound of her voice. When he dismounted, he nearly collapsed. Martha rushed to his side, supporting him with surprising strength. "You are hurt," she said, noting the burns on his hands and a gash on his forehead. "It is nothing serious," Kyle said, but his voice was rough with exhaustion and smoke inhalation. "We saved the herd. That is what matters." "You matter," Martha said fiercely, surprising herself with her vehemence. "Come inside. Let me take care of you." She helped him into the house while his men tended to the horses and dispersed to their own quarters. In the kitchen, she heated water and gathered clean cloths and bandages. Kyle sat at the table, swaying slightly with exhaustion. Martha worked carefully, cleaning the soot from his face and tending to his burns. Her hands were steady despite the emotions churning inside her. When she reached the gash on his forehead, he winced. "Sorry," she murmured. "This might need stitches." "I have had worse," Kyle said, but he did not pull away from her touch. As Martha cleaned and bandaged his wounds, she became aware of how close they were, how intimate this moment felt. Her hands rested on his shoulders for balance, and his eyes were closed, his face tilted up toward her. On impulse, she leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to his temple, just above the bandage she had placed there. Kyle's eyes opened in surprise. "Martha," he said softly. "I was so worried," she whispered. "When you did not come home, I thought perhaps something terrible had happened. I realized that I could not bear to lose you, Kyle. You have become so important to me." His hands came up to grasp her waist, holding her gently. "You are important to me too." More than I knew how to say. They stayed like that for a long moment, balanced on the edge of something new and frightening and wonderful. Then Kyle released her and sat back. "I am filthy and exhausted," he said, his voice rough. "And you deserve better than a smoke-stained cowboy who can barely keep his eyes open. But Martha, when I am cleaned up and rested, I would very much like to have a conversation with you about what comes next for us." Martha nodded, her heart pounding. "I would like that too." That night, Martha lay awake in her bed, her mind racing. She had spent so long protecting herself, building walls around her heart to prevent further pain. But Kyle Ramsey had somehow slipped past those defenses with his quiet kindness and steady devotion. She found herself wanting things she had thought were forever lost to her: companionship, partnership, maybe even love. But the auctioneer's words still echoed in her mind. Barren. Damaged goods. Could she really offer herself to a man as good as Kyle, knowing she could never give him children? He said it did not matter, that she would have time to love only him, but was that enough? Would it always be enough? She thought about Sarah and her baby daughter, taken by fever. Kyle had known the joy of fatherhood, however briefly. Would he eventually come to resent Martha for being unable to give him more children? These fears kept her awake until dawn, and when she finally rose to start the day, she felt exhausted and uncertain. Kyle appeared mid-morning, looking much better after a night of rest and a thorough wash. His injuries seemed minor in the daylight, and his eyes were clear and direct as he approached her in the kitchen. "Can we talk?" he asked. Martha nodded, wiping her flour-covered hands on her apron. They went out to the porch, where a slight breeze provided some relief from the heat. "I need to tell you something," Martha said before Kyle could speak. "And I need you to really hear me. I am barren, Kyle. The auctioneer was right about that. I lost 3 babies during my first marriage, and the doctor told me that I likely can never carry a child to term. There is something wrong inside me, something broken." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she forced herself to continue. "You were married before. You had a daughter. You know what it is like to be a father. I cannot give you that. I cannot give you sons to carry on your name or daughters to spoil. If we were to be together, it would just be the 2 of us, always. And I need to know if that is really enough for you, or if someday you will come to hate me for what I cannot give you." Kyle listened intently, his expression serious. When she finished, he reached out and took both her hands in his. "Martha," he said gently, "I am going to tell you something, and I need you to believe me. I loved Sarah with all my heart, and losing her and our daughter nearly destroyed me. But loving them taught me something important. Love is not about what someone can give you or how they can serve your purposes. Love is about cherishing someone for who they are, not what they can provide." He squeezed her hands gently. "When I said at that auction house that you would have time to love only me, I meant it. I do not need children to feel fulfilled. I need partnership, companionship, someone to share my life with. If that someone is you, then I will be the luckiest man in Arizona territory." Tears streamed down Martha's face. "But what if it is not enough? What if you change your mind?" "I will not change my mind," Kyle said with absolute conviction. "Martha, look at me. Really look at me." She raised her tear-filled eyes to meet his gaze. "I am 31 years old," Kyle continued. "I have a bum leg that will never fully heal. I have nightmares about the fire that killed my wife and daughter. I work too hard and I am stubborn, and sometimes I go days without saying more than 10 words to anyone. I am far from perfect, but you have never made me feel lacking or deficient. You have never treated my injury like a weakness or my grief like an inconvenience. You have given me something I did not even realize I was missing, a reason to come home at the end of the day. He brought her hands to his lips and kissed them gently. "I am not asking you to be perfect, Martha. I am asking you to be mine, just as you are, barren or not, broken or not, however you see yourself. I see a strong, kind, beautiful woman who has survived things that would have destroyed lesser people, and I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife." Martha's breath caught. "Are you proposing to me?" "Yes," Kyle said simply. "Though if it is too soon, I can wait. I can wait as long as you need." Martha thought about all the reasons she should say no. She thought about all the ways this could go wrong, all the heartbreak that might await them. But then she thought about the past few months, about the peace she had found in this house, about the quiet joy of sharing meals and conversations with this good man. She thought about how her heart had nearly stopped when she feared he might be hurt in the fire. She thought about how right it felt to be here in this moment with his hands holding hers. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Kyle, I will marry you." The smile that spread across Kyle's face was radiant, transforming his usually serious expression into something almost boyish. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Martha felt something inside her finally relax, a tension she had carried for so long that she had forgotten it was there. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Sierra Vista. Martha wore a new dress that Kyle had insisted on buying for her, a beautiful green silk that matched her eyes. Kyle wore his best suit and looked nervous and proud in equal measure. Several of Kyle's ranch hands attended, along with a few townspeople who had heard about the unusual love story between the disgraced woman and the cowboy who had saved her. The auctioneer was notably absent, and Martha was grateful for that small mercy. The pastor, an elderly man named Reverend Johnson, spoke briefly about love and commitment before pronouncing them husband and wife. When Kyle kissed Martha for the first time as her husband, she felt something warm and bright bloom in her chest. It was not the desperate, consuming passion of her youth, but something deeper and more enduring: trust, respect, and genuine affection. They returned to the ranch that evening, and Martha felt a thrill as Kyle carried her over the threshold, despite his protesting leg. He set her down gently in the front room, and they stood there for a moment, suddenly shy with each other. "Are you nervous?" Kyle asked. "A little," Martha admitted. "It has been a long time since I have been with anyone, and my first marriage, the physical side of it was not particularly good." Kyle cupped her face in his hands. "We have all the time in the world," he said gently. "There is no rush. We can take things as slowly as you need." But as it turned out, Martha did not want to go slowly. She wanted to claim this new chapter of her life, to prove to herself that she could have this, that she deserved this. She kissed Kyle with growing confidence, and he responded with a passion tempered by tenderness that took her breath away. That night, in the large bed that had once seemed so empty, Martha discovered that physical intimacy could be something beautiful, something healing. Kyle was patient and attentive, focused on her pleasure as much as his own. When it was over, they lay tangled together, and Martha felt a completeness she had never experienced before. "Are you all right?" Kyle asked, stroking her hair. "Better than all right," Martha said, and she meant it. "I feel like I am finally home." The months that followed were the happiest of Martha's life. She and Kyle settled into married life with surprising ease, their existing friendship providing a strong foundation for romantic love. They worked together during the day, Kyle tending to the ranch while Martha managed the house and started a small vegetable garden. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, talking and planning for the future. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Martha's careful management of finances allowed them to invest in more cattle, and Kyle's skill as a rancher ensured the herd grew steadily. By spring of the following year, Kyle was able to make the final payment on Samuel Garrett's debts, officially freeing Martha from the shadow of her father's failures. On the day Kyle returned from the bank with the paid-in-full notice, they celebrated with a special dinner and a bottle of wine that Kyle had been saving. As they toasted to new beginnings, Martha felt a deep gratitude for the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place, to this man. "I have something for you," Kyle said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Martha opened it to find a simple gold necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a heart. It was not expensive or elaborate, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "I wanted you to have something that showed how I feel about you," Kyle said as he fastened it around her neck. "You are my heart, Martha, the best part of me." Martha touched the pendant, feeling tears of joy rather than sorrow for once. "I love you," she said. "I do not think I have actually said those words to you yet, but I do. I love you so much." "I love you too," Kyle said, pulling her into his arms. "More than I thought possible." As the seasons turned, their love deepened and matured. They faced challenges together. A harsh winter that tested their cattle, a border dispute with a neighboring rancher that Kyle settled with diplomacy rather than violence, a bout of illness that left Martha bedridden for 2 weeks while Kyle nursed her back to health with touching devotion. Through it all, the question of children hung unspoken in the air. Martha had been so certain that she could never conceive again that she and Kyle had not taken any precautions. Month after month passed with the expected results, confirming what Martha had always known about her body. She waited for Kyle to show disappointment, to express regret, but it never came. He seemed genuinely content with their life together, never mentioning children or expressing any desire for them. Still, Martha worried. She could not help but notice how Kyle's eyes lingered on the children they occasionally encountered in town, or how he smiled when one of his ranch hands brought his young son to visit. One evening in late autumn, about 18 months after their wedding, Martha finally gathered her courage to address the elephant in the room. "Kyle," she said as they prepared for bed, "do you ever regret marrying me?" He looked at her in surprise. "What? No, never. Why would you ask that?" "Because I see how you look at children," Martha said quietly. "I see the longing in your eyes, and I know I can never give you that. I worry that someday you will wake up and realize that I am not enough." Kyle sat down on the bed and pulled Martha onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "You are not just enough, you are everything. Yes, I see children and sometimes I feel a pang of something, remembering my daughter. But that is grief, Martha, not regret. I do not regret choosing you. I do not wish for a different life. This life here with you is exactly what I want." "But if you could have children," Martha pressed, needing to hear him say it plainly. "If I could have children with you, that would be wonderful," Kyle said honestly. "But since we cannot, I am not going to spend my life mourning something that was never meant to be. I meant what I said that day at the auction. You have time to love only me, and that is exactly how I want it." He kissed her softly. "Martha, you are my wife, my partner, my best friend. You make me laugh when I am being too serious. You challenge me when I am being stubborn. You have turned this house into a real home. You are more than enough. You are perfect for me, exactly as you are." Martha buried her face in his shoulder, overwhelmed by the depth of his love and acceptance. "I do not know what I did to deserve you. You survived," Kyle said simply. "You endured pain and humiliation and loss, and you came out the other side still capable of love and trust. That takes more strength than most people will ever know. I am the lucky one, Martha. Never doubt that." That winter, Martha received a letter from her brother Daniel in Boston. It was the first communication she had received from him since their father's death, and she opened it with trembling hands. The letter explained that Daniel had only recently learned of their father's death and the subsequent loss of the family ranch. He expressed guilt for not being there to help, explaining that his own practice had been struggling and his wife had been seriously ill. He asked after Martha's well-being and whether she needed any assistance. Martha wrote back immediately, telling him about Kyle and their marriage, about the ranch and their life together. She assured him that she was well and happy, perhaps happier than she had ever been. She invited him to visit if he ever found himself traveling west. To her surprise, Daniel wrote back quickly, saying that he and his family would be traveling to California the following summer for his wife's health, and they would very much like to stop in Arizona territory to meet Kyle and see Martha's new home. When Kyle learned about the planned visit, he was delighted. "It will be good for you to see your brother again," he said, "and I would like to meet the man who had such an influence on your life." They spent the spring preparing for the visit, making improvements to the house and ensuring the guest room was comfortable. Martha found herself excited but also nervous. Daniel had not seen her since before her disastrous first marriage. Would he approve of Kyle? Would he judge her choices? Daniel, his wife Alina, and their 2 children, a boy of 8 and a girl of 6, arrived in early June. The reunion between brother and sister was emotional, with both Martha and Daniel shedding tears as they embraced. Alina proved to be a kind, gentle woman, whose illness had left her somewhat frail but whose spirit was strong. The children were shy at first but quickly warmed to their Aunt Martha and Uncle Kyle. During the week they stayed at the ranch. Martha and Daniel spent hours talking, catching up on years of separation. Martha told him everything, about the auction, about Kyle's unexpected rescue, about finding love and happiness when she had thought such things were impossible. Daniel listened to it all, and when Martha finished, he took her hands in his. "I am so sorry I was not there when you needed me," he said, "but I am grateful that Kyle was. He is a good man, Martha. Anyone can see how much he loves you." "I love him too," Martha said. "More than I thought possible. You deserve this happiness," Daniel said firmly. "After everything you went through, you deserve a man who sees your worth and cherishes you the way Kyle obviously does." On the evening before Daniel's family was scheduled to leave, the adults sat on the porch after the children had gone to bed. The conversation turned to family and the future, and Alina asked Martha if she and Kyle planned to have children. Martha felt her chest tighten with the familiar anxiety, but before she could respond, Kyle spoke up. "Martha cannot have children," he said matter-of-factly. "And before anyone offers sympathy or pity, let me say that it does not matter. We have each other, and that is enough." There was a brief, awkward silence. Then Daniel said quietly, "I admire you both. Many marriages would crumble under that kind of challenge, but you two seem stronger for it." "We are partners," Kyle said, reaching for Martha's hand. "In every sense of the word. Whatever we face it together." Alina smiled warmly. "That is the foundation of any strong marriage. You are both very fortunate to have found each other." After Daniel's family departed, Martha felt a sense of peace settle over her. Seeing her brother again, having him meet Kyle and approve of their marriage, had healed something inside her that she had not realized needed healing. Life continued its steady rhythm. The ranch grew more prosperous each year, and Kyle and Martha became well-respected members of the community. Martha started teaching reading and writing to the children of Kyle's ranch hands, discovering that she had a gift for education. Kyle encouraged her to expand this informal school, and soon she was teaching several children from neighboring ranches as well. 5 years passed, then 10. Martha entered her late 30s, and then her 40th year. Her auburn hair gained streaks of gray, and fine lines appeared at the corners of her eyes. Kyle's limp became more pronounced as arthritis settled into his damaged leg, and his dark hair silvered at the temples. But their love, rather than fading with time, only grew deeper and more essential. They had weathered storms both literal and figurative. They had nursed each other through illness and injury. They had built something lasting and true. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kyle surprised Martha with a trip to Phoenix, where they stayed in a fine hotel and attended a theater performance. As they dressed for dinner that evening, Martha studied her reflection in the hotel mirror, noting the changes time had wrought. "I am getting old," she said, not quite sadly but with a kind of wonder. Kyle came up behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "We are getting old together," he corrected. "And you are as beautiful to me now as you were the day I first saw you in that auction house." "I was a mess that day," Martha said, but she was smiling. "You were magnificent," Kyle said. "Holding your head high despite the cruelty around you. I fell in love with you that day, even though I did not realize it at the time." Martha turned to face him. "I am so grateful for you. For everything you have given me. You saved my life, Kyle." "No," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "We saved each other. I was just existing before you came into my life, going through the motions. You taught me how to live again." They kissed, and Martha felt the same thrill she had felt on their wedding night, proof that passion need not fade with time. That night, as they lay together in the luxurious hotel bed, Kyle said quietly, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Martha asked, drowsy and content. "I want to make the school you have been running official. Build a proper schoolhouse on our land, maybe hire another teacher to help you. There are so many children in this area who do not have access to education. We have the resources to change that." Martha sat up, suddenly wide awake. "Are you serious?" Completely, Kyle said. "You have found something you are passionate about, something that brings you joy and helps others. I want to support that. Besides, it would be a kind of legacy, would it not? Even if we do not have children of our own, we can help shape the future by educating other people's children." Tears filled Martha's eyes. "That would be wonderful, but it would be expensive." "We can afford it," Kyle assured her. "The ranch is doing well, and this feels right to me." "What do you think?" "I think I married the best man in Arizona," Martha said, kissing him soundly. They returned from Phoenix with plans and dreams. Over the following year, they built a proper schoolhouse on their property, a sturdy building with large windows and a bell tower. They hired a young woman named Sarah Dawson, fresh from Teachers College back east, to help Martha with the growing number of students. The school flourished. Children from miles around attended, learning reading, writing, arithmetic, and geography. Martha discovered that teaching filled a space in her heart she had not known was empty. These children were not her own, but in a way, they became hers nevertheless. She invested in their futures, celebrated their successes, and grieved when circumstances forced some of them to leave school early to help their families. Kyle often visited the school during the day, bringing treats for the students or helping with repairs and maintenance. The children adored him and he them. Martha would watch him patiently explaining something to a struggling student or lifting a small child onto his shoulders for a better view of something interesting, and her heart would swell with love. This, she realized, was their family. Not born of their bodies but chosen and nurtured by their hearts. When Martha was 45 and Kyle 48, they received word that Daniel had died suddenly of a heart condition. Martha was devastated by the loss, even though she had seen her brother only a handful of times since that visit so many years ago. Kyle held her through her grief, and when she was ready, he arranged for Alina and her now adult children to come visit. Alina had aged considerably and was clearly struggling with her own grief. Over the course of her stay, she confided in Martha that she was finding it difficult to manage on her own in Boston. Her son had his own family to care for, and her daughter was preparing to move to Europe with her new husband. "Would you ever consider moving here?" Martha asked on impulse. "We have plenty of room and you could help with the school if you wanted. Or simply rest and let us take care of you for a change." Alina was quiet for a long moment, then said, "You would do that. Take in your brother's widow, you are family," Martha said simply. "And we have plenty of space and plenty of love. Why should you struggle alone in Boston when you could be here with people who care about you?" When Martha proposed the idea to Kyle, he agreed immediately. "Of course she should come," he said. "This house has always been too big for just the two of us anyway." So Alina came to live with them, bringing with her a lifetime of memories and a gentle presence that enriched their home. She proved to be a natural with the younger students at the school, her patience and kindness making her beloved by the children. Martha found that having another woman in the house was a blessing she had not anticipated. She and Alina became close friends, sharing confidences and supporting each other through the challenges of aging. Kyle, too, appreciated Alina's presence, enjoying the lively dinner conversations and her quick wit. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset, Alina said, "You have built something remarkable here. A home, a school, a real community. Daniel would be so proud of you, Martha." "I could not have done it without Kyle," Martha said, reaching for her husband's hand. "You two are proof that family is not just about blood relations or children," Alina said. "Family is about love and commitment and showing up for each other, day after day. You have created a beautiful family here, even if it looks different than what some people might expect." Martha felt tears sting her eyes, but they were good tears. She looked at Kyle, whose eyes reflected the same emotion. They had built this together, brick by brick, day by day. A life full of purpose and love, even without the children they could never have. The years continued to pass. Martha's 50th birthday came and went, celebrated with a party that included students, former students, their families and friends from all over the territory. The schoolhouse they had built was now joined by a second building to accommodate the growing number of students. Young Sarah Dawson had married one of Kyle's ranch hands and started her own family while continuing to teach. Kyle, now in his early 50s, had gradually turned over most of the day-to-day ranch work to his foreman, a capable young man named Thomas Grant. Kyle's injured leg troubled him more with each passing year, and he had finally admitted that he could not work as hard as he once had. Instead, he focused on managing the business side of the ranch and spending more time at the school, where he taught practical skills like woodworking and animal husbandry. Martha noticed that Kyle never complained about the changes, never mourned his fading physical strength. He had always been a practical man, accepting what he could not change and adapting to new realities. It was one of the many things she loved about him. On a cool autumn evening, 20 years after they had first met, Martha and Kyle took a rare evening alone to ride up into the mountains above their ranch. They brought a blanket and a simple supper, planning to watch the sunset from their favorite overlook. As they sat together, Kyle's arm around Martha's shoulders, she reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them to this moment. "You remember what you said to me that day at the auction?" Martha asked. "I said a lot of things," Kyle replied, smiling. "Which particular words are you thinking of?" "You said that if I was barren, I would have time to love only you," Martha said. "And you were right. I have had time to love you completely without distraction or division, And it has been enough, Kyle, more than enough. It has been everything. Kyle pulled her closer. I think I got the better end of that bargain, he said. You have loved me better than I ever thought I deserved. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. I meant it when I said it all those years ago, but I had no idea then just how true it would turn out to be. No regrets? Martha asked, needing to hear it one more time. Not a single one, Kyle said firmly. Except maybe that I did not find you sooner. They watched as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The valley below was bathed in golden light, and they could see their ranch house in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney where Alina was no doubt preparing dinner. We have built a good life, Martha said contentedly. We have built a beautiful life, Kyle corrected. And we are not done yet. We still have years ahead of us, years to love each other and watch our students grow and make new memories. Years to grow old together, Martha added. That is the best part, Kyle said, kissing her temple. Growing old with you has been the greatest privilege of my life. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Arizona sky, they made their way back down the mountain to the home they had built together. The house glowed with welcoming light, and they could see Alina moving about in the kitchen through the windows. They rode into the yard and Kyle helped Martha down from her horse, his hands strong and steady despite his years. As they walked toward the house hand in hand, Martha felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. The auctioneer had tried to shame her, to reduce her worth to her ability to bear children. But Kyle had seen past that, had seen her true value, and together they had created a legacy that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with love. Inside, Alina had indeed prepared dinner, and they sat together at the large kitchen table, sharing food and conversation and laughter. After the meal, as they often did, they moved to the front room where Kyle read aloud from a book, while Martha did needlework and Alina knitted. It was a peaceful, ordinary evening, the kind they had shared countless times before. But Martha never took such moments for granted. She knew how precious they were, how easily things could have turned out differently. When it was time for bed, Kyle and Martha climbed the stairs to the room they had shared for 2 decades. As they prepared for sleep, Martha caught Kyle watching her with a soft smile. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking how blessed I am," Kyle said. To have this life, to have loved and been loved so completely." Martha crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, the same heart that had chosen her when everyone else had dismissed her. "I am the blessed one," she said. "You saved me, Kyle, in every way a person can be saved." "Then we saved each other," Kyle said, echoing words he had spoken years before. "And we will continue saving each other every day for as long as we have." They climbed into bed together, fitting naturally into their familiar positions. Kyle's arms came around Martha, and she felt safe and cherished as she had every night for 20 years. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Kyle replied. "Always and forever." As Martha drifted toward sleep, she thought about the auctioneer's cruel words one last time. He had meant to hurt her, to define her by her perceived deficiency. But instead, those words had led to this moment, this life, this profound and enduring love. She was not barren, she realized, not in any way that truly mattered. Her life was abundant, overflowing with love and purpose and meaning. She had poured herself into Kyle, into their students, into the community they had built together. She had created a legacy that would outlast her physical existence. And she had loved Kyle with every fiber of her being, holding nothing back, giving him all the devotion and tenderness and passion that might have been divided among children, but instead was focused entirely on him. Just as he had said so long ago, she had time to love only him, and it had been more than enough. The years that followed were gentle and sweet, marked by small joys and deep contentment. Martha and Kyle celebrated their 25th anniversary surrounded by friends and family, including several of their former students who had become teachers themselves, carrying on the legacy of education they had started. Alina remained with them until she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, having found a second home and a second family in her final years. Her death was mourned by the entire community, and Martha and Kyle buried her next to the small family cemetery they had established on their property. As Martha entered her mid-50s and Kyle his late 50s, they began to slow down considerably. Kyle's leg pained him constantly now, and he walked with a cane. Martha's joints ached on cold mornings, and her vision was beginning to fail. But their love remained constant, an anchor in the inevitable changes that aging brought. They spent more time sitting on the porch, watching the world go by, holding hands and talking about the past and the present. They had long since stopped worrying about the future. They had built something lasting, and whether they were there to see it continue or not, they knew it would endure. One spring evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Kyle suddenly said, "Do you know what my favorite moment of every day is?" "Tell me," Martha said, squeezing his hand. "It is right now," Kyle said. "This exact moment, sitting here with you watching the day end. I have loved every moment we have spent together, but these quiet times, just the two of us, are the ones I treasure most." "I treasure them too," Martha said softly. "And I treasure you every single day." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from blue to gold to purple. In the distance, they could hear children's laughter from the school, which now ran evening classes for adults as well as daytime classes for children. The sound made Martha smile. "We did good, did we not?" she said. "We did very good," Kyle agreed. "Better than I ever could have imagined." As full darkness fell and the stars emerged in their countless thousands, they made their way inside, Kyle leaning heavily on his cane and Martha's arm. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with memories and love. They prepared for bed with the comfortable efficiency of long practice, each anticipating the other's needs and preferences. When they finally settled under the covers, Kyle pulled Martha close, and she nestled against his side with a sigh of contentment. "Thank you," Kyle said quietly. "For what?" Martha asked. "For everything," Kyle said. "For trusting me when you had every reason not to, for building this life with me, for loving me so well and so completely, for being exactly who you are." Martha felt tears slide down her cheeks. "Thank you for seeing me when everyone else saw only what I lacked. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for showing me that love can be gentle and kind and constant." "Always," Kyle promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Always and forever." They lay together in the darkness, hearts beating in sync, breathing in harmony. Outside, the Arizona night was alive with sound, crickets and night birds, the distant call of a coyote, the wind sighing through the juniper trees. Inside, all was peace and love. As Martha drifted toward sleep, she thought about the auctioneer one last time, but now his words held no power to hurt her. She smiled in the darkness, secure in Kyle's arms, and whispered a silent thank you to the cruel man who had inadvertently led her to this perfect love. She was not barren. She was beloved, and that made all the difference. The years continued their steady march. Martha and Kyle celebrated 30 years of marriage, then 35. Their hair turned completely white, and their bodies grew increasingly frail, but their minds remained sharp, and their love burned as brightly as ever. The school they had founded had become a permanent fixture of the community, with a board of trustees ensuring it would continue long after they were gone. Several of their former students had become teachers, doctors, lawyers, and business owners, carrying the gift of education into the world. When Martha was 63 and Kyle 66, they finally decided to step back from active involvement in the school, turning over complete control to the younger generation. It was bittersweet, but they both knew it was time. They spent their days in quiet contentment, tending a small garden, receiving visits from friends and former students, and simply enjoying each other's company. They had slowed down considerably, but they were happy, surrounded by the fruits of a life well lived. One warm summer evening, as they sat on their porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Martha turned to Kyle and said, "If you could go back and change anything, would you?" Kyle did not hesitate. "Not a single thing. Every choice I made, every path I took led me to you. How could I regret any of it, even spending all that money at the auction?" Martha teased gently. Kyle laughed, the sound warm and rich despite his years. "Especially that. Best investment I ever made. I bought myself a lifetime of happiness that day." "You did not buy me," Martha corrected. "You freed me." "We freed each other," Kyle said, as he had so many times before, "and we built something beautiful together." Martha rested her head on Kyle's shoulder, feeling his arm come around her in the gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their decades together. "I wish we could have more time," she admitted. "Another 30 years, another 40, it still does not feel like enough." "No amount of time would be enough," Kyle agreed, "but we have had more than most people get, and we have used our time well, we have loved well." "Yes," Martha said softly. "We have loved very well indeed." They sat together as night fell completely, stars emerging one by one in the vast sky above. The desert air was soft and warm, carrying the scent of sage and dust, and the flowers Martha had planted around the house decades ago. "Kyle," Martha said after a long, comfortable silence. "Yes, my love. I am so glad you saw me that day. I am so glad you spoke up when everyone else was content to mock and judge. I am so glad you chose me." Kyle squeezed her gently. "I am glad I saw you too. You changed my life, Martha. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to live instead of just exist. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." They stayed on the porch until the night grew cool, then made their way slowly inside to the bedroom they had shared for so many years. Their movements were careful and deliberate now, bodies protesting the simple acts that had once been effortless. But when they lay down together, Kyle's arms around Martha in the darkness, everything felt exactly as it should. They had weathered every storm together. They had built a life of meaning and purpose. They had loved each other with a depth and constancy that many people spent their entire lives seeking but never finding. "Good night, my heart," Kyle whispered. "Good night, my love," Martha replied. And in the quiet of their room, surrounded by decades of shared memories and wrapped in each other's arms, they drifted into peaceful sleep. Two souls so perfectly intertwined that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Martha and Kyle lived on together for several more years, their love a beacon of hope and inspiration to everyone who knew them. They faced the challenges of aging with grace and humor, supporting each other through illness and infirmity, never once regretting the choices they had made or the life they had built. When Kyle finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, Martha grieved deeply, but not hopelessly. She knew she had been blessed beyond measure to have had so many years with such a good man. She knew their love had been real and true and lasting. She continued on for 5 more years, staying active in the school they had founded and welcoming a constant stream of visitors who wanted to hear stories of the early days and the remarkable love story between the woman the auctioneer had called Barren, and the cowboy who had said she would have time to love only him. When Martha died peacefully at the age of 72, surrounded by friends and former students, her last words were of Kyle and the beautiful life they had shared. She was buried next to him in the small cemetery on what had been their ranch, under a simple headstone that read, Martha Garrett Ramsey, beloved wife and teacher, 1854 to 1926, she loved well. The school they had founded continued to thrive for generations, a lasting testament to their vision and dedication. And the story of their love became legend in Arizona, a reminder that family is not defined by biology, that worth is not determined by fertility, and that the deepest love can flourish in the most unexpected circumstances when two people choose to see each other truly and love each other completely. The auctioneer had meant to shame Martha, but instead his cruel words had set in motion a love story for the ages, proving that sometimes the things the world calls weakness are actually the doorways to our greatest strengths, and that being told we are less than enough can lead us to discover we are actually more than we ever imagined possible.